Jackson van Uden is a historian and one of the key personnel involved in the Katherine of Aragon festival, which takes place each year at Peterborough Cathedral, the location of Catherine's grave, and Peterborough Museum. From talks to tours, light displays, and even a commemoration to Katherine with representatives from Rome involved, it's a spectacular event and one that has been going on, surprisingly, for literally hundreds of years in one way or another. Today, Jackson and I discuss this festival and more around Catherine's story and explore why we believe her story is one that is often misrepresented. Welcome back to the Tudor Chest Podcast, episode 69, the Katherine of Aragon Festival, with Jackson van Uden. Welcome to the Tudor Chest Podcast, Jackson van Uden. How are you?
No, doing very well, Adam. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're the last episode of the year as well, because I've decided I am going to give myself a break over Christmas. We're here today to talk about Katherine of Aragon and the Katherine of Aragon Festival that you're heavily involved in the creation of, which is taking place next month at the start of 2025. Before we get into that, just a few questions just to get to know you a bit better. So can you provide me with a short intro into your background, so where you grew up and what you now do full time?
Yeah, so, I'm from Peterborough, which is, a great thing for me to have grown up around Peterborough Cathedral. We all refer to Katherine of Aragon first name here. So, I'm from Peterborough. I've played sport all my life. So my main interest most of my life has been rugby, which kind of my sport background kind of dictates a lot of things of how I do things and what parts of me I have to mute down for my content as well. But then I went off to uni to do history. I really enjoyed that, but went off the train to be a teacher during COVID. Didn't enjoy that quite as much, and then went off and did a master's in politics as well. So a lot of my interest is in power, how power is used, but then the very concepts of power. But then part-time historian, part-time teacher as well, because I do like to make sure that I socialise as well, and teaching gives you a great social life with other teachers. And it means that you also have about 150 people a day keeping you on your toes, stopping you from, losing social relevance or any grasp of what social life and actually socialising people's like. So, yeah.
Where did you go to university?
I went to Chichester on the south coast.
Okay, nice.
Which is great. I mean, when you love sport and you wear rugby shorts the whole year, when you're somewhere which never drops below 12 degrees, it is glorious. Sunniest uni in the UK, as they say in their marketing department.
Yeah. Well, I went to Brighton, so another down on the south coast, but that was awesome. Winters in Brighton were bracing.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. My next question is, what sparked your passion for history? Was it growing up where you did?
Yes and no. So I went to Tower of London when I was probably about 4 or 5, and my parents always refused to get me and my brother a toy. No toys, but if you want a book, that's fine. So my first proper book that I can remember was Horrible Histories, an England copy of Horrible Histories, which I absolutely loved, and I used to read so much. And Horrible Histories and history books and Dead Famous were staple parts of my growing up, my childhood. But then when I discovered sports, more specifically rugby, when I was about 10, history was kind of there as a secondary, tertiary interest, but sports kind of remained that primary interest until, when I was 17, I broke my collarbone, and I wasn't taking history in my first year 12.
Right.
Now, when I say first year 12, I was zonked out on codeine for about a good 9 months. So I chose to do year 12 again. And even when I did it again, I didn't choose history for the first 3 weeks. I fell asleep in a business lesson, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll choose history. And history was like still, my favourite subject, but I'm still playing rugby, which, I absolutely love rugby. I can't say a bad word about it, but I did my ACL. And when you do something like your ACL, it is such a massive injury. It changes the way that you play sports. It changes the way you interact with everything. But also, because it's such a devastating injury, it forces you to kind of reevaluate what you want to do, how you want to do it, and what you can do. When you can't walk properly for about 3-4 months, you kind of have to, you can't get on a rugby pitch. And that's where my love for history kind of was revitalized, because I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't get on the pitch. And so I just started revising and doing my Wars of the Roses work and doing my A-level work, and threw myself into it a bit more. And then went off to Chichester, still recovering from my ACL. And I just, I was absolutely hooked, because I was at such a great university with fantastic lecturers. And I was just in a place that I was happy. I was able to focus on, history, play a little bit of rugby on the side at the local club. But yeah, I was just in my total element. I think that ACL surgery really let me reconsider what I wanted and how I was going to do it. And yeah, as much as I still hate that ACL injury and still get a dodgy knee in the winter, it's led me to where I am now.
Rugby is not a sport I'm particularly knowledgeable about, but a friend of mine is married to Shane Geraghty.
Stop it. What a quality player.
So his wife Lizzie is someone I've known since we were at school together. So if you could pick a single moment from history to go back and witness, you can jump in a time travel machine, what would it be?
Oh, that I know we're on a Tudor podcast. So my undergrad dissertation was on the 1953 Conference on Totalitarianism at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And I'm obsessed with this conference, utterly obsessed, like to a weird extent. Like, people died in such weird ways. One died because his bathrobe set on fire. Another one died in a plane crash. Just, totally bizarre.
What is this, sorry?
It's a conference on totalitarianism, which is like a concept about Stalin and Hitler.
Yeah.
And I'm utterly, but the conference participants died in such a weird way. But there's one person who, after his biography of his life, after he left Russia as a political asylum seeker and spoke at this, I do not know what happened to him. I do not know where he went, how we got to the US. And I really would like to go back to that moment and witness that conference to see what this man was like, because he's got such an amazing life as a political prisoner in Russia. And some of these conference participants are my absolute heroes in the way that I like to write history. But because some of them died in such mysterious ways and bizarre ways and had such amazing lives, I would just love to see what this mix of a conference is like, and see how these people interact as well, and see how I think these dynamics played out, and see how they actually played out. It's a very weird little niche, but it's something I've been obsessed with for about 6 years.
That's definitely the most unique answer I've ever had to that question.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go Plantagenet because you said about it being a Tudor podcast, and you said about the Wars of the Roses a moment ago. I thought you were going to go further back. That's a great answer as well.
Yeah, I know. That's probably the weirdest answer you've had. So
I think the other one that was not the weirdest, but the sort of the most niche, was someone said that they'd love to go back and see what actually happened to Amy Robsart, Robert Dudley's wife, that may or may not have committed suicide. That was quite a niche one.
That's a very good one as well. I'd have to say that's an amazing one.
For me, it would be Anne Boleyn's coronation, is what I would go for.
Well, if I'm going Catherine related, I'd like to see what's happening in the Tudor court the day Catherine dies with Henry and Anne.
Yeah.
Because there's so many contrasting reports. I believe that they wore yellow.
Yeah, they did.
Well, there's so many contrasting sources on that, and I think it was in a disrespectful manner. But
there's this whole theory about it being the colour of mourning in Spain is nonsense. The colour of mourning in Spain was black. So I don't know where that comes from. But there's also, I've read reports that both Henry and Anne shed tears at her death. But again, that's just one report against many, so who can say? And so is there a Tudor misconception that you would love to change?
I absolutely would love to change the fact that, and I always refer to this in my videos, I would love to change the fact that we just ignore Arthur in Catherine's story. As you can tell, I've kind of dived into Katherine of Aragon an awful lot this year. I think we kind of have this misconception that Catherine just, and a popular misconception, not so much as people who are within the Tudor field, that, you know, Catherine just emerges as this perfect wife for Henry. But actually, you know, before that, she's been in this kind of purgatory between Ferdinand and Henry VII, and she has this really quite sad marriage with Arthur dying very young. And I think this misconception that we have is that we tend to forget Arthur, not only within the Tudor narrative, but as a significant impact on Catherine, because, you know, that's her first marriage. And, you know, I always refer to Henry when talking about Catherine as Catherine's second husband, because it's true. So, you know, that's something that I'd want people to kind of remember, touch on a little bit more, and learn more about that marriage as well, because I think it's a very important part of not only Tudor history, English history, but also Catherine's story.
Yeah, and the wider ramifications as well of what that marriage did and what it represented. I mean, a fact that a lot of people don't necessarily, some may have heard about it, but, you know, a lot of people don't realise that Catherine's marriage is what effectively caused the execution of the Earl of Warwick, the younger brother of Margaret Pole. People just don't know that aspect of Catherine and Arthur's marriage. And there's a lot more to it than I think, to your point, that people just don't pick up on.
No, and I think there's the other thing about Arthur as well is, and then the misconception that we probably have surrounding the impact of Arthur's death is that, you know, people think Henry was born to be king. He wasn't born to be king. He wasn't really raised or given an apprenticeship to be king. So, you know, you have so many ramifications and consequences coming from Arthur's death, more than just Henry becomes king. There's societal impacts, there's dynastic impacts, such as, you know, the Earl of Warwick. There's marriage impacts as well. And I think more attention needs to be paid to Arthur within, you know, the Tudor dynasty story.
So, as I said at the start of the episode, we're here today to talk about the Katherine of Aragon festival that you're heavily involved in. So, to start, can you introduce the festival for me? How long has it been running for? What takes place there? Where is it held? And so on? Yeah,
so the Katherine of Aragon festival probably could be referred to as one of the oldest history festivals in the country, because it has its roots in the religious ceremonies and commemorations of Catherine's life, going back to 1539. So we always make sure that religion plays a central part in the festival. You know, Catherine was a Catholic, so there are Catholic religious events going on across the week. And we also have a commemoration service on the day that Catherine died. And that's live streamed this year as well. So people from across the world can pay their respects to Catherine. But also, you know, we've really started to go hard on the history element as well, because we know people want to learn more. So we have living history reenactors who are absolutely fantastic across the museum, Peterborough Museum, Peterborough Cathedral, who show aspects of Tudor life. So we have people who are doing the Tudor court at the cathedral, which is absolutely amazing, having this procession of people in Tudor costume walking into the cathedral. And then people in the museum who are showcasing elements of Tudor life as well. So last year I got to hold swords and pikes and a mace, which is, you know, as any lad loves. You know, I love holding a sword. It's pretty awesome, to be honest. So, but then this year we're adding an extra dimension to that history offering by showcasing an extended program of talks. So usually there is a talk associated with the festival, but this year we're doing 6 talks, which all dive into different elements of Tudor life and parts of Tudor history that relate to Catherine. And I think it's really important to do that as well, because Tudor history has really had a boom, you know, past 20 years, and people want to learn more. But crucially, after COVID as well, you know, we're still in the impacts of COVID, people want to go and see things now. People want to go and listen to these historians who they watched during COVID, they read their work during COVID, and now they can actually see them. And as someone from Peterborough, it was for me growing up, not a lot of history came up here. You know, even though we're on the A1, we're on the main line, there was not a lot going on. And I know Peterborough is not one of the most well-off cities in the UK. There is a lot of deprivation. There's a big wealth divide. And if I can play a role with the cathedral and the museum in bringing that cultural capital to Peterborough, giving people the opportunity to see these people instead of having to go off to London, go off to, you know, these big history festivals at Chalk and Gloucester, then, you know, we're helping this city, which is, you know, continuously for the past 10 years been listed as the worst place to live in the UK.
Is it? To
become a better place. Yeah. Strangely, I don't think so. And I'm sick and tired of saying that, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought it was, I know Hull was often named. I'm surprised Peterborough.
Yeah, totally surprised. You know, when you have a cathedral as gorgeous as that, you can't be the worst place to live.
Yeah, I mean, there's places like Slough, which I'm sure are much worse. So the festival takes place in Peterborough Cathedral itself.
Yeah, so it takes place in Peterborough Cathedral and Peterborough Museum. So it's a partnership between the two biggest history institutions in the city. So, you know, seeing some of those living historians in the cathedral is amazing. And then the talks are going off in the Knight's Chamber, just in the cathedral close, which has got a fantastic view of the cathedral. So, you know, all taking part within the cathedral precinct and around the museum as well. And there's some Tudor history tours going from the museum where you can go around Peterborough and see the different elements of Tudor history. And we've got Collie Weston Slate, because obviously Collie Weston was such an important part of that early Tudor dynasty as well, with Margaret Beaufort living up at Collie Weston Palace. So there's so much history going off in that span between the 22nd and the 29th of January that, you know, it's just great to have Peterborough coming alive with it.
So as a historian, a Tudor historian, what is it about Catherine's story that you were particularly drawn to?
Yeah, so, you know, aside from living in Peterborough and having grown up with her, you know, as I said at the beginning of the episode, I'm principally a historian of power. And I primarily, for the last God knows how many years, looked at Stalin, Hitler, Xi Jinping, Mao, now looking at Trump. Like, these are modern ideas of power. But often when I'm writing, I come across elements of, you know, when we talk about Boris Johnson, we look at the Henry VIII powers. And, you know, often I find myself looking back and saying, well, there's some elements here that remind me of monarchical power. And often the person that I think of is Henry VIII. And when you think of Henry VIII, I can't, as I live in Peterborough, I can't not think of Catherine and think about, you know, the ordeal that she had in those last 3 years, because that's mainly what I've been taught whilst living in Peterborough. And that's kind of what draws me to learn about Catherine, because it's not only Henry and Henry's own use of tyrannical power, but it's Catherine's exposure to that. And, you know, she's not only witnessed it, she's been a victim of Henry's tyrannical power as well. And that's kind of what draws me to this period, but also wanting to learn about Catherine as well.
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it, really, with Catherine, because her story is often reduced down to the final years of her marriage to Henry VIII and obviously the dramas of Anne Boleyn. But it overlooks the fact that there were actually many years of genuine happiness between Henry and Catherine, and obviously particularly at the start of Catherine's reign as Queen Consort. So can you talk me through some of the earlier years, and will this part of Catherine's story be explored at the festival?
Yeah, so, you know, Catherine, I believe, was probably the only one that Henry properly loved. You know, and that's an opinion of mine, historical opinion. The time that they spent married was more than the other five put together. You know, just to put that in context, that's a long time. Definitely for Henry as well. So, you know, when you have moments like the Battle of Flodden, her marriage to Henry VIII, his, you know, support of, you know, allowing her courtiers like Maria de Salinas to stay in England and serve her in her own personal household. You know, there are very, very compassionate moments from Henry. You know, instead of just forming ladies in waiting for her, he marries her the second she comes on the throne, or he essentially the second he comes onto the throne as well, despite the fact that his father wasn't particularly in favour towards those final years of Henry's. So these kind of elements will be explored at the festival as well. So, and they also have Mary the First, which is a very happy moment for Catherine as well. So in terms of looking at Catherine, Elizabeth Norton in the talk series will be looking at Katherine of Aragon, Princess Mary, and the reigning queens of Spain. So Elizabeth will be looking at those kind of relationships between Catherine and Mary. Now, Peter Stifel as well, someone I went to university with as well. It's really great to see Peter coming up to Peterborough. He will be looking at the relationship in the imagery and the iconography between Mary and Catherine. And I think we also need to put back into the narrative that Catherine and Mary are mother and daughter. And I think we tend to look at Mary purely through her violence, through that, false epitaph, Bloody Mary. So, looking at that relationship and how that kind of shows in their iconography and their queenship. And then Nikki Clark will be looking at the ladies in waiting, who are such an incredible part of Catherine's life. Maria de Salinas was one of the first women to come to England with Catherine and was there for Catherine when she died. And The Waiting Game is an amazing book. So that's what Nikki will be doing, Nikki Clark. And then Nicola Tallis will be looking at the life of Margaret Beaufort, of course, is incredibly important in this area, incredibly important to Henry VIII as well as his grandmother. And then Nathan Amen will be looking at the marriage between Henry VII and Elizabeth Woodville, which kind of set the scene for this whole...
York.
Oh, Elizabeth York, sorry. So many Elizabeths, isn't there?
The reason I said it is people will be going, huh?
Yeah. I get so like, I'm like, Christ, which, like, when you go through the Wars of Roses, which Somerset, like?
Oh, I know. And the problem is also there are so many Marys, so many. I mean, a few weeks ago I had a weekend away in Warwick with friends. It's like this new thing where basically every year me and my friends from uni go away and for the weekend, and I just talk at them about history. It's something they wanted me to start doing.
Good holiday.
Yeah. And we watched Elizabeth, the Golden Age, but before watching it, I had to draw a little family tree to explain Mary, Queen of Scots. And just within this little family tree, there were 5 Marys. So I totally get your get your pain.
I was having to talk to I was talking to the kids I was teaching today. We're reading The Dark Lady by Kayla. And we were talking about Elizabeth and the hatred between England and Spain. And I was having to draw this family tree. And I was like, well, this is where Mary comes in and Philip comes in. They're like, which Mary? I'm like, oh, Mary the First, her big sister. She had a sister? Yeah, well, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. So many Marys. So, you've kind of alluded to this already, but given that Catherine is buried in Peterborough Cathedral, do the people of Peterborough feel like Catherine's she's one of your own?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly do. Alluding, like, the fact that I've just kept calling her Catherine all the way through this episode is part of that. She's such a big part of life in Peterborough here. We have the festival every year. Most people who are my age and above went to the festival as children. I myself went to the festival as a school kid. So it's ingrained in us pretty much from living here. One of the schools is even called Queen Catherine. It's such a big part of Peterborough life, and a lot of people, thankfully, I'm so grateful that it's free to enter the cathedral. You can donate if you want, and I do heavily recommend that you donate to keep these institutions alive and keeping them restored. But you can enter the cathedral, and every time I go to the cathedral at least once a week, and every time I go into the cathedral, regardless if it's 10 a.m. or 4 p.m., there are people around the Catherine's tomb. And yes, 1 or 2 people might be tourists. The vast majority of people are from Peterborough who have gone into the cathedral for a moment of peace, and then they've wandered across the Catherine's tomb, because she is such an important part of life here. The Tudor rose is quite prominent in a lot of insignias that remain from Tudor times. And when you have a school named after her, and kids go to that school that is named after her, it's a big point. And then a lot of schools take part in the festival as well. Last year we had kids from the King's School which is the cathedral school set up by Henry VIII. And they did poems about Catherine. And so it's such a big part of city life. So when the festival starts in January, a lot of schools come for a school day. We have schools bring children to do poems or songs in commemoration of Catherine. So it's hard to escape it as a Peterborough local.
So are there any other significant burials in the cathedral? I know Mary Queen of Scots was buried there for a time before being moved to Westminster Abbey, but is there anyone else of note in the cathedral?
Yeah, so we have, some of the old abbots buried in the cathedral, going across mainly the south aisle. South aisle, yes, it is in the south aisle on the east end. But I think the most important one for Peterborough locals is a guy called Old Scarlett. Old Scarlett is buried in the west end of the cathedral, maybe just outside or in the wall. Can't remember off the top of my head. But Old Scarlett was the grave digger through the Tudor period.
Okay.
And he lived to an incredibly old age. I think he was in his 80s or 90s.
Yeah, that's about 206 by modern standards.
Yeah, that's like incredible, especially for a grave digger as well, with the arduous labour and that. But he was involved in Katherine of Aragon's burial when she was buried as a Princess Dowager of Wales. So he helped dig her grave inside the cathedral. But he also was involved in, even though he was incredibly old, he probably didn't lift the spade, but he was also involved in Mary Queen of Scots' burial as well, because he would have remembered the procedure that they went through for Catherine's and been able to pass down that information for Mary's burial as well when she was brought from Fotheringhay. So, in terms of a important Peterborough burial, Old Scarlett is probably the most important. And when you're inside facing the back of the west front, there are two portraits. So there is a framed portrait of Old Scarlett on the south, on the left, which was an old painting, recreation painting of Old Scarlett. And on the right, there's a wall painting. And when they went to restore an element in the cathedral, they'd lifted off this framed painting of Old Scarlett, and they found that wall painting behind. So they moved the framed copy to the other side so we can see the old wall painting of Old Scarlett.
Nice. That's such a cool story. I've never been to Peterborough Cathedral, but I'm coming to the festival, so I'm looking forward to seeing it because it's a place I've never been to.
Oh, you are missing out. I often say, when I've gone to another cathedral, and I don't just say this as a Peterborough local, I know I am biased, but when I go to another cathedral, I'm like, it's not quite Peterborough. And even I've got a quote for this as well. So I was reading Nicholas Orme's book on the cathedrals of England the other week, and one of the contemporary sources that he said from an 1800s cathedral travel guide says that Peterborough is the best of the second-class cathedrals. And by second-class cathedrals, he means not St. Paul's, Canterbury, and so on. But I'll take that. Best of the second class is still a winner in my mind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as I say, never been. But shockingly, I'm a born and raised Londoner, and I've never been to the British Museum.
Oh,
crazy.
I understand though, tourist trap.
Yeah, I've never got round to it. I keep meaning to go, but yeah, I'm sure I will at some point. So you're very involved in programming the content that takes place at the festival. So the historian talks. When you're crafting the agenda, do you sort of have a particular theme in mind for each festival? And if so, what's the theme for 2025? Or is Catherine just the theme, if that makes sense?
So sitting down for this year, when I sat with Alex and a couple of other team members, and we were looking at talks, and we were looking what we wanted to do. We obviously wanted to place Catherine at the centre of this because it's the Katherine of Aragon festival. But, we wanted to make sure that people not only knew about Catherine and could have talks about Catherine, but we could fill 6 talks on Catherine would obviously be fantastic. But you can't fill 6 talk slots with just about Catherine. You have to do other things. So we wanted to do things that
probably look quite a lot of crossover as well.
Yeah, an awful lot of crossover. So what we wanted to do was to do a talks program that looked at Catherine, people who are important to her, but also provided contextual information for the period. So hence why we went for some talks about, early Tudor history, such as, Beaufort's, Henry VII, but also we looked at Mary the First as well, which we thought was incredibly important because obviously Mary is very, very important to Catherine. And then when the team, said, well, you've curated this, we'd like you to do a talk. I decided to look at it a way based on my own research as well, which is into power, into tyranny, political terror. And, looking at the tyranny of that fit perfectly with what I do. So, I curated the other 5 talks first around what was important to Catherine. Because, coming from Peterborough, the other people I talked to are from the area, live in the area and have done for a long time. These were all areas that we felt were important to look at, for not only for people of Peterborough, but people who were coming to Peterborough as well.
So it sounds like, in a way, what you're doing when you're programming these talks is that you're basically adding depth to people's wider knowledge about the environment that Catherine inhabited and things that where necessarily the talks aren't going to be purely about her, but it's giving people that greater understanding, that level of that just greater depth into the wider story around her.
Yeah, and it's probably, annoyingly down to my training as a teacher and looking at curriculum building, where, I might have an end point, a climax that I want to look at. So if I'm looking at the Wars of the Roses, I wanted to look at that theme of power. The theme of this is Katherine of Aragon and her life. Well, how do I build context around that for people who want to come to all 6 talks so they can understand as much as they can within all 6? But if people want to come to individual talks, which are incredibly interesting, each of the 6 talks, well, 5 of the talks, and I hope 1 is, 5 of the talks are incredibly interesting, and people can watch it. But also people who love the Tudor history period, can come and see, talks which can build off areas that they haven't looked at, or give greater context for areas that they love, because some of these figures in Tudor history have such a cult-like following. People like Margaret Beaufort, Elizabeth of York do have a cult-like following. And it's great to provide something for Tudor history fans that they can learn and come to Peterborough to do that.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, with the, as I mentioned earlier, I run a historic tour company, Simply Tudor Tours. We're sponsoring the Katherine of Aragon Festival. We're sponsoring Nathan's talk. But a big part of what we do with that is the tour that we ran in September, the Rise and Fall of Anne Boleyn. We had speakers as part of that we had a barber surgeon come in, for example. So a guy in character who did a talk about bloodletting, leeches, all of that kind of Tudor medical operations and that kind of stuff, just to add depth to the wider knowledge. So I totally get where you're coming from with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite clearly that teacher who, if you ask me a question, I will go off on a 5-minute contextual information. Oh, we need to learn about this. And if you need to learn about this, we need to talk about this. I think I lost 15 minutes of a lesson earlier just doing that. And then afterwards, the kids were grinning. I'm like, oh, bugger. So...
So do you find that the talks sort of help define the overall feel of the festival?
No, I think they add. I think they add because the overall, the centerpiece of the cathedral and the museum's offering is the commemoration service for Catherine. Yeah, that
right.
Sorry, that commemoration service is the center point, because we have dignitaries coming from Spain, all over England, to come and pay their respects to Catherine, and it's such a moving ceremony. I mean, I was there last year, and it was just incredible. I really can't put into words how moving that ceremony was.
I will definitely have to make sure.
Yeah, it really is something else. And the fact that across the course of that week, when I was filming content and so on, people had come from all over the place to come and lay pomegranates on her tomb. And, sometimes from Peterborough, you kind of do take for granted that you got a queen in the cathedral. You kind of do forget, because you are so ingrained in Tudor history, and especially as a historian as well. You do kind of, when you do research into these people, you read in the books about these these things, and you're interviewing historians on podcasts and so on, and just having casual conversations with people like that, you do tend to take for granted like these people that you look at and you study. But the moment for me that really kind of set it into context, just how important Catherine is to people, is I was there filming next to her tomb, and someone was walking down the north aisle towards Catherine's tomb, and I could hear these footsteps, and I was like, okay, these footsteps, I'm gonna have to stop filming because it'll pick up on the mic and so on. And this guy came across, he said hello, and he was dressed head to toe, Spanish hood, whole Katherine of Aragon costume, and he was holding a pomegranate. And we had a little chat, and we moved out of the way, and he
was dressed as Katherine of Aragon.
Yeah, he was. He'd come all the way from Brighton dressed as Katherine of Aragon,
Nice.
all the way on the Thameslink train. I'm not jealous of that journey. But he laid the pomegranate on her tomb, and he just stood there for 2 minutes, just head bowed, looking at the tomb, looking at the pomegranate, and he turned around and he just nodded at us and walked back to his train.
Really?
And those kind of moments, as a historian, as someone involved in the festival, as someone from Peterborough, do kind of show that the centerpiece of this festival is the commemoration services for Catherine, because people still want to pay their respects, and I think people recognise what she went through, recognise that she was a queen, and that while she didn't get that respect in the last few years of her life, we can give her the proper respect now, and do it properly. And I think that's why myself and several, the team who organised this see the religious aspects and the commemoration service as a nice way to pay respect for Catherine, and that the history adds to the festival.
So that's the only aspect that actually people from around the world can spectate with that one, right?
Yes, they can. It'll be...
When is it happening?
29th January, and the details are on the website. And then we have also got services from Friday the 24th. We've got services. So we've got a commemoration service and wreath laying at 11 o'clock on Friday the 24th, that people can come to the cathedral and watch and pay their respects.
So outside of that and the historian-led talks, what else can people expect from the event? What else have you got going on?
Oh, there's two events which I'm so I'll start again. Sorry, I put my mug down and didn't think it was going to be that loud. So there's two events I'm so excited for. So the first one, I'll go for the first one because it makes super amount of sense when we put into context my rugby playing history. There is a Tudor banquet. I love food, and I am so excited to go to this banquet. The opportunity to eat in the cathedral with as close as they can make to Tudor foods and Tudor. I'm just so excited to sit there in the cathedral and experience that, because for some people that's going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I think that's such a cool event to be doing, because you get to experience something that Catherine would have experienced, and it's just a really cool thing to do. To eat in a cathedral is just something. And then the next thing that I'm super excited, it kind of ties in as an even thing, is an event called Sonnet Lumiere. Now, this is genuinely, and I've been all over the country and done historical experiences, gone ones across the world. This is the best historical experience I've ever had in my life. So it is on Friday evening at the cathedral. They turn the lights off and they light the cathedral up with candles. And Tim, the vice dean at the cathedral, takes you through an immersive historical experience around the cathedral. He tells you the history of the building, some of the history of Peterborough. Peterborough Cathedral has an incredible history, set on fire a couple of times, turned from being an abbey into a cathedral. There's so much history in the building itself. And to go through someone with such a intimate connection to the building and its history in an immersive soundscape experience with the whole cathedral lit up with candlelight is...
Yeah, that sounds incredible.
I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because it was honestly, it was one of the best things.
Because obviously the festival, it's like you pay for what you want to go to, don't you? Is that a ticketed thing?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll have to book
that's a
tickets
ticketed event. Yeah.
That sounds like something I definitely would want to do.
Yeah. Oh, genuinely, I've been lost for words a couple of times, but I just sat there afterwards, and Tim came to me and was like, "How was it? You know, you've done all this thing. How was it?" And I was like, "I can't say anything." Saying that was amazing. That was beautiful.
I'm really looking forward to the banquet as well. The banquet, I'm sure, is going to be brilliant. We're going along to that, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think Sarah, my business partner, and her husband might be arriving fully bedecked in Tudor dress.
Oh wow. That will add to that. And we actually encourage, and I think that's a good point there, we encourage people to come to this festival dressed up, because it adds to that overall vibe and feeling around the city at that point, because it is such a great city. It is such a great building, and to be able to celebrate it in that way, you know, I don't dress up. That's my line. But it's great seeing people dressed up.
Yeah, it's not something I'm into, but they go nuts for it. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward. The food aspect's going to be great. As part of our tour company, we work quite a bit with Brigitte Webster. I don't know if you know Brigitte, but she's a sort of top of her game Tudor food historian. And at the tour we're running in May, it's about Anne and the relationship between Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth, and she's recreating a banquet for us at her house. That she's got the original menus of a banquet that Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII had. And she is recreating this banquet in its entirety to the T. Like, it's literally going to be what they ate.
Oh, wow. That's going to be incredible. That's... I'm salivating now, Adam. Stop.
It's going to be a nightmare. We've got like a few vegans and a few vegetarians, so that's going to be a challenge for Brigitte, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Henry would appreciate that. Yeah.
So the festival, you also market it as being very family friendly, which I think is great. You know, exposing children to history early on is always brilliant. So what are the types of activities that the kids can get involved in?
So the kids' events are mainly on the Saturday and Sunday because obviously they're not in school. So, you know, we have these, you know, when I mentioned at court with the Tudors and at home with the Tudors at Peterborough Cathedral and Peterborough Museum, respectively, they're events that families can go and drop in and learn more about Tudor life. Like I said, last year I held a sword. The reenactors here at the museum do let people hold them, do let people have a look at them. It's cool. Why don't you want to hold a sword? And then at court with the Tudors, you know, these reenactors at the cathedral are fantastic. You know, they know so much about their characters that they're playing. They're going full method with it. They don't break. So last year on the podcast, I spoke to people who were playing Maria de Salinas, and so I interviewed Maria de Salinas, interviewed Elizabeth Stafford. They're so knowledgeable, and they have so much fun with it. And when you see young children walk into the cathedral and suddenly they see Henry VIII, the amount of children who I saw just stand there with their mouths open going, oh my God. It's so magical to see. And then we have family tours as well. So we have costumed family tours going around the cathedral, so people can children can learn more about the history of the building, more about the place that they live, which I think is very important, you know, to learn not only what these people lived like and what their life was like, but also what Peterborough was like as well. And I think that's a good part of the recent curriculum as well. And they do Tudor time detective family tours at the museum as well, so they get to go around the museum, learn more about Peterborough, subconsciously as well, because a lot of the displays at the museum are about Peterborough, and they get to do these detective tours, solve all these puzzles, but also learn more about how Tudors were at home, what Peterborough is like across that whole tour. And we also do the school day as well, where schools come and do different activities as well. And I think that was really important for us when we were organising this, because like I said earlier, you know, I grew up in Peterborough. I live in Peterborough. I teach in schools across Peterborough. And it's so important to make sure the next generation can learn about these things. And the very fact and the proof that it works is that I went to it as a school kid. I'm now involved in the running of the festival. There's a proven track now of people from Peterborough experiencing it as a child and now wanting to be involved. And I think it's so important to give back to Peterborough and make sure people in Peterborough know.
Nice. Is the Henry VIII that you work with? Is it David Smith's A Loyal Heart?
I think it's I think they're from Regal Rose. I can't remember his name.
Okay, the big one at the moment is he's a guy called David Smith, but his sort of character name is The Loyal Heart. He's a full-time Henry VIII. He's been on This Morning and stuff, and we work with him. He's remarkable but terrifying when he wants to be.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
We had a banquet in the Great Hall at Hever Castle, and he was there as Henry VIII. There'd been this whole process where I was doing the run through with the folks at Hever. I said, right, he has to be served first. You can't serve anyone else on the tour or me. Serve him first. And this poor waiter just didn't get the memo, and he took a starter out to one of our tour participants. And Henry VIII, stopped the dinner and stood up and marched over to this waiter and gave him such a dressing down. It was hysterical. And I went back of house, and all the staff were like, we're not going back in there. We're too scared.
That's very Henry VIII. I think that's a good character.
Yeah. But it's actually, in a way, it really gives people the sense of what it would have been like, because his mood permeated through the room and defined how we all felt. And I think that's the art of what these people do, isn't it? Is that they are literally bringing history to life.
Yeah, and I think that's why having the reenactors is so important, because kids learn and adults learn as well. I think we tend to forget that when we have costume performers and reenactors, is that the parents learn just as much as the children. And some of them are even, as you said, some of them are scared of Henry VIII when they see him walking through the cathedral.
So my final question is, what is the key takeaway that you really hope festival attendees take with them regarding Catherine's story in particular?
I think the important part for me is that people walk away with this and understand just how amazing a woman Katherine of Aragon was. Not just a queen, not just, someone who worshipped the Catholic faith, not just the wife of Henry VIII. She is a woman in her own right who is incredibly powerful, incredibly inspirational, or inspiring. I'm a dreadful English teacher. Incredibly inspiring, and just, she deserves that respect. And that's the one thing that we want people to come away with, that she is an incredible person, and we need to learn more about her life, and we need to pay our respects properly. Not just to make up for what Henry VIII did, but actually to pay our respects to a figure who inspired not only her own daughter, but generations of women afterwards.
It's funny, isn't it, with Catherine, that I think a word that a lot of people maybe, when they think about Catherine's story, she's almost treated as a failure in some respects, and that's so wrong. I mean, her story is remarkable, and this is a woman who, yes, saw and it went through so much, and people just, as we sort of discussed earlier, they tend to focus on the drama of Anne Boleyn and what that represented, but there is so much more to Catherine's story.
We paint I think pretty much all six of Henry's long-suffering wives as tragic.
Yeah.
And, Catherine is certainly not tragic. She had a horrific time, the mid 1530s, but she was an inspiration in terms of how Henry expected queens to behave.
Yeah.
That is an incredible legacy. And we also need to remember as well with each of these six is that Henry's decisions are Henry's decisions. The accountability lies with Henry. If Henry decides to be an arsehole, for want of a better word, that's Henry's decision. And Henry decided to treat these women and his wives in that way. They did not decide to be treated in that way. And nothing that happens to any of the six of these wives is their fault.
Yeah.
And I think that's particularly true with Katherine of Aragon. She fights this all the way. That is not someone who, when you look at history, and a lot of people look at it and just think, oh, poor Katherine. Oh, she fought it every inch of the way until her dying breath. And that's really something. And I think we forget that a lot.
And it's so true that it was Henry making the decisions. Any bad treatment, particularly to Mary as well. Anne Boleyn gets people accuse Anne of being the person who bullied Princess Mary and made her life terrible. But it becomes abundantly clear that it was Henry, because in the wake of Anne's execution, things don't change for Mary, until she signs the Act of Supremacy. That's when things change. But that tells you straight away that it wasn't Anne calling the shots there. It was always Henry. And I think that, again, that's something people overlook.
Yeah, and I think, Katherine encapsulates a lot of the Six's experience of Henry. He's, a horrible person towards them when he loses interest. Yet he was a hopeless romantic.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, you can put down a lot of his treatment of other people down to the pressures of kingship. We can't put the treatment of partners and wives down to the pressures of kingship, because, for the vast majority of the time he's with Katherine, those pressures of kingship are, A, not particularly present, and B, alleviated through the fact that, we also forget that there's Henry Fitzroy. Henry Fitzroy, he wants to legitimise.
Yeah.
Pressures of kingship aren't particularly relevant. It's only when he starts to see those pressures, he starts to feel pressures and being pressurised about those pressures, that they become an issue.
Well, thank you so much for coming on for a discussion today about the Katherine of Aragon Festival. I'm assuming people can still sign up to attend.
Yes, so tickets are still available on the cathedral website. You can come. There's still tickets available to all the talks, several of the events. They are selling out fast, and I'm going to fall into that classic pre-Christmas cliche. They're a perfect Christmas present. You'll love buying them for whoever loves Tudor history. I've had friends who have already bought tickets for friends for Christmas as well. So go there. You can see some of your favourite historians. You can see some of your favourite figures from history. You can see me stressing and grinning at the fact that I'm there as well. So and you can see Adam as well, because Adam will be there. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all there.
I will be there. Yeah, I'll be there. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to the talk. Forgive me, I can't remember the guy's name, but the talk about the iconography of Mary and Catherine. I'm really looking forward to that talk.
Oh, Peter's fantastic. I'll put you in contact with Peter, because you'll love him.
Brilliant. Well, where can people find you, Jackson? What's your main sort of social platform?
Yeah, so you can find me on @HistoryWithJackson on Instagram and TikTok, and then you can find the Katherine of Aragon Festival on the Cathedral and the museum's websites. I will send you that link, because there is a lot of underscores and numbers and dots, which I will fall over. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you again so much for coming on, and I will see you in the flesh in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, dude. Thank you very much.
Have a great Christmas.
You too.
And so that brings me to the end of this week's episode of the Tudor Chess Podcast, and my final episode of 2024. My thanks to Jackson for coming on to the show to discuss the Katherine of Aragon Festival with me. I'd also like to say a big thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in each week throughout 2024 to listen to some of the most fascinating and varied stories from across the world of the Tudors and beyond. I'm going to be taking a break now until the new year. This series will pick up on January 9th. Until then, have a spectacular Christmas and a very happy new year, and see you in 2025.